Bojo and Dinawemaga Dog. Welcome to Twyla Kokum Space. I could have done the tuning forks prior to starting the recording, but I wanted you to benefit from that as well. It's been a minute since I have done a recording on this channel, and I'm happy to be here in this space with you right now. And I hope that the words that I'm going to speak mean something, actually land with you. I have on my table here, I have a bowl of water in a copper bowl, and I also have my water that I will be drinking from in a copper mug. And around my neck, I have a copper bucket that was gifted to me by a Nijikwe, my Nijikwe Tina, as a reminder to keep my relationship to water alive, and remember that it is a sacred part of the medicine that I bring to the world. And so that is the setting that we have right now today, and hopefully I'll be able to carry this message forward for you in a good way. I wanted to talk to you about I'm going to talk to you about grace, because that's like my thing. And when I first started this channel, my thought was that, I'll be teaching people how to find grace and how to tap into grace. And the more that I spent time trying to find my own grace, the more I realized that, number one, that's very difficult to do, to find your own grace in this world that we live in. Number two, it's very subjective and it's very personal. And so every person's ability to find their pool of grace is going to be very personal. So my job now is not to teach you how to find grace, how to find your way to living in grace, but just to encourage you that let's keep practicing together, and encourage you to find your own pool of grace, your own ability to tap in to that grace, which I still believe is our human superpower and is the only way that we're going to find a way to equity and peace, is to live in grace. We're just coming off of the most recent No Kings protests around the world. A lot of people taking to the streets or showing their opposition to the current state of the world in their own ways, some on the streets, some doing it more subtly. And I'm very encouraged by the fact that people are taking this opportunity to stand up and to call for equity and justice. And what I want to remind everyone is that if we don't start living in our own ability to give grace to ourselves and to each other, we're going to continue to get kings. The patterns over our known recorded history, from what I've been able to see, show us that we'll always get kings. And how are we going to actually really separate ourselves from being subject to kings, whether they be monarchical or oligarchical? We've got to figure out how to get away from that. So thank you, by the way, miigwech, ki miigwech, to everyone who showed up to protest and to stand up and say, we don't want to live this way anymore, and we don't want our children to live this way anymore. I think it's interesting to understand that the number of people that took to the streets to show up for this protest are on a range anywhere from a deep rage, bringing that into the spaces, to a deep optimism, and anything in between. And while I would what I would like to make sure that we're keeping an eye on is that it's okay to be on either end of those spectrums. And if you find yourself as a person who is holding deep rage, or as a person who is holding deep optimism, live in that space, but also make space for the people on the other end of that spectrum. We need to be able to feel what we feel, to learn what we need to learn from those places of existing, and incorporate that into a path that leads us away from the patterns of having kings decree how we show up as individuals and as the body politic. So like I said, one of the things that I had previously thought that I was going to do on this channel was to say, hey, let me teach you how to have grace. And I quickly, after doing a few recordings, realized I can't do that. Because first of all, I don't really know how to live in grace. Over and over again, I found myself checking myself in little and big ways of how I show up in the world. And it is a process. But what came to me is that I do have a deep pool of grace, and it's like a well that's hidden deep in the forest. And that forest is full of brambles and bushes that have been fed by the fertilizer of anger and trauma and grief. And while those are all valid experiences and they've informed who I am and how I've come to be in this moment in time, they're not what fertilizes my deep well of grace. So I've had to bushwhack, so to speak, through my own trauma, my own pain, my own battles with fear, guiding me or informing how I show up in the world. So all that is to say, listen, you have a deep well of grace within you. That grace has been with you maybe before you were born, but definitely since you were born and incarnated on this planet. And that well of grace is where I hope you will be able to find your way back to through some of the things that I share on this channel. Not instructional, more informational, or inspirational. So one of the things that came to me today was, I've been sitting with it for a minute, is what does it really mean to find our way to grace, and what is the outcome of finding our way to grace? And what's really stuck with me is if you want justice, practice grace. If you want equity, live in grace. And that starts with you. You have to figure out how to be able to give yourself grace, knowing what your shadow is. And that's a really big part of where we find ourselves today, is our own personal shadows and the shadow of the body politic that has been created as a result of our constant bumping into each other, running over each other, harming each other because of our individual shadows, which has created a collective shadow. So we're now in the time, I believe, of being able to see those shadows and to be able to find our way through that shadow work without letting fear and control inform us. But that's a very individual pathway, and a lot of us are going to have to figure out how to get some help with that. Professional help, community help, spiritual help, whatever works for you, find your way to that. Because if you desire to have equity and justice in our world moving forward, you will need to be able to find your own grace and live in it and understand your grace in the context of your own shadow. Because you might be going along a road, because this has happened to me. You might be going along a road. I'm working on my grace. I'm looking at how to practice grace, how to live in grace. And if you're not keeping an eye on your own shadow, you're going to deceive yourself, and you're going to hit a very difficult dead end where you're not going to be able to get to that next level of equity and justice. So all this to say, I don't have all the answers, and I don't really purport, is that the word? I don't really presume to be able to tell you how to live in your grace, but I do want to see if, as a community, we can contribute to a greater body of knowledge that we can use to inspire others and to remind ourselves of how to live in grace. So, this is as much for me as it is for whoever might be seeing this. A couple of thoughts that I had around that. I mean, I've talked about the shadow. Make sure that you are keeping yourself honest with regard to what your own personal shadow is. And another point is to choose joy where you can. Joy is the highest vibration that a human can operate on. And it's not a static vibration. It's going to have peaks and valleys. So there will be times where you won't be able to access your joy, but still you are encouraged. I'm going to encourage you to try to reach that vibration of joy, no matter what your circumstances are. And hopefully you can call in the helpers to help you navigate those valleys. I know I've experienced some deep valleys where my shadow has been very difficult to work through to help me get to a place of joy. All that is to say, it's worth the effort. Choose joy, and choose joy as the antidote to fear. Now, that's not to say that fear isn't real, and it's a valid emotion for the human experience, but we live in a time where fear, well, depending on how you view your lifetime here and whether or not you believe that you've had other lifetimes here, there's a good chunk of deep human history where fear has been the governing factor of and a way of controlling the people. But if you're able to drink from that well of grace, even if it's just for a moment, or even if you just have the inkling of what it would taste like to drink from your own well of grace, that can help you get through it. And I'm hoping that I will be able to share some stories in the future about people who have been able to navigate their way through the brambles of their own trauma and their own dark pieces of pain and hurt, and been able to find their way to that pool of grace. A big point that we need to make sure we keep our eyes on also is to make space for others. Like, we are on an individual journey. That's nothing new, but also we've got to learn to make space for people who have spent generations trying to inhabit this in the face of deep oppression, deep trauma, deep harm. So listen to people of color, listen to Indigenous voices. Those are the opportunities where you have the best chance to get outside of yourself and to actually not, how do I want to say this, not co-opt their processes for finding your way to your well of grace, but as a lesson, like a blueprint for here's what their pathway to joy has looked like. How would that translate for you individually in your own experience, and be able to build a big, beautiful cathedral of grace that is shared with others. So I don't want to do a really big video. I'm already getting longer than what I wanted to, but I also wanted to do a reading for you guys today. I got a new set of oracle cards, which I'm really pleased with. They're more organic, I want to say. So I'm going to do some oracle readings here for you guys. The oracle deck that I'm using is called the Comfy Cozy Witch, which I think really makes sense for our time as we're going through right now. So the first card that I'm pulling is chocolate, indulgence, self-care. The second card that I'm pulling is air, communicate, and listen. And the third card I'm pulling is gratitude, thank and receive. So I hope that you can read those pretty well and that they are showing up the right way. I'm not going to read the meanings from the books because I think that from the book, because I think that what I want you to do is I want you to be able to use your own intuition to determine what these meanings could be for you. But yeah, I think these are really powerful. So once again, indulgence and self-care. If you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not paying attention to your own shadow and caring for that shadow, you're not going to be able, your pathway to your well of grace is going to be a little more complicated. Air, communicate, and listen. Listen is the biggest piece of that, I think, for all of us. We need to be able to listen to each other and make space for each other. And then after we've listened, then be able to communicate what it is that we think we should be doing together as a collective. And then gratitude, of course, gratitude is the foundational core for everything. Thank and receive. So I'm going to try to keep these in the future really short. I don't want to bore anybody with what I'm trying to do here. Hopefully this message has landed for you. And if you like what you're hearing today, please share with folks that you think might be able to benefit from this message. Please do like and subscribe to this channel if you would like to see more of these. I know it's been pretty hit and miss over the last several months. There's been a lot going on in my life where I haven't really been able to carve out the time to do these, but the work is ongoing, and I'm sure that you can identify with that, right? You are doing the work, even though there might not be any outward evidence that you are doing the work. So for me, the video is kind of an outward evidence kind of thing, but I do hope to be able to carve out more time to share with you in the future. So that's all for now, Mama P, and I hope to see you here again soon. And please do leave me a comment if this has landed for you. And I love you, and we will get through this together. Miigwech.